Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's session on Bossing the Buy Box with Repricer. We're so happy to see such a great turnout. We are delighted to have you with us today. So just to introduce myself, my name is Katie. I'm part of the onboarding and success team here at Repricer. So my main goal is to ensure that all our lovely clients are getting the most out of Repricer. And that's why these webinars are so great because we have such amazing features that we really want to put on the main stage here for you guys. We are also joined by our product owner, Mr. Colin Palin.
Hi
Colin,
there.
Colin has a wealth of experience and knowledge in this area, so he's going to share that with us today. So just some information on the webinar. It's going to be approximately 20 to 25 minutes, and it will then be followed by a Q&A with myself and Colin. So if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop them into the chat portal, which is just on the right-hand side of your screen there that you can probably see, and we will answer them at the end. So I really hope you enjoy today's session, and over to you, Colin. Colin, thank you so much for this.
No, it's great to hop on, Katie. Great for you for hosting, and thanks for everyone who's turned up for the webinar today. I hope we all come away learning something. So let's get started. So we're going to start by going over what we're going to cover today. So first of all, Buy Box 101. Now, I know this is going to seem a little boring to a lot of you. You're Amazon sellers. You have an idea what the buy box is already. However, I'm a firm believer in laying out the foundations and making sure everyone's on the same page. It also happens where there are little things that people miss. So just making sure everyone knows what we're on about, that we're all on the same page is very important. We're going to talk a little bit about why the buy box is so important. And then we're going to talk about what impacts the buy box awarding process. Following on from that, we're then going to have a look at the buy box features within Repricer. This primarily will be focused on the buy box chaser, buy box optimizer, suppress buy box feature, amongst others. We're then going to have a little look at how you keep track of your buy box performance within Repricer. And also, as Katie mentioned, we have the Q&A. With that in mind, I would strongly recommend if you have any questions, stick them into the chat box and we will get to them and give you some answers. So without any further ado, let's get started. So what is the buy box? The best way to think about the buy box is it's Amazon's method of vouching for a third-party seller. As we're all likely aware, Amazon started as just another storefront before they started experimenting with this third-party seller stuff that we all are involved in today so dramatically. What they discovered quite early on is they couldn't sell all the products they wanted to sell, and they were allowing third-party sellers on them, but they had no way of showcasing a good third-party seller if they weren't selling the product, which is where the buy box came in. They started to allow some third-party sellers to get this special box that people would see and would prominently allow them to buy the product, just like it was the Amazon purchase box before, but now with them. And this is what became the buy box. As I said, it is the prominent display on Amazon. It is prominent there on the top, and that's the reason why the majority of sellers or buyers buy from the buy box. They're not aware of all the other third-party sellers options that are available, which is why it's so important. And there are several kinds of buy box, which we're going to discuss today. It's not all completely cut and dry. There are different kinds. So let's have a look at a couple of buy boxes in the wild. We have a pretty standard Amazon listing here, and we have our buy box on the right-hand side. Very prominent, and you can see there why so many buyers just buy from the buy box and don't notice all the other sellers in this tiny little corner at the bottom. But then even if they do click on that, you have the buy box prominent at the top yet again, which just continues to funnel more and more buyers into the buy box. Which again, I can't reiterate this enough times. This is why so many buyers buy from the buy box and aren't even aware of everything else that's on the listing. So I talked about buy box types, and let's start by looking at them. First of all, we have the sole winner buy box. What would have been just called the buy box 3 or 4 years ago, today is becoming far less common. The sole winner buy box is binary. It basically means you either have the buy box or you don't have the buy box. Throughout the day, it can change who has the buy box, but it is static. You either have it or you don't have it. It's that cut and dry. Today, however, the majority of listings are what we now would call a shared buy box. This means that at any time, the listing can have 2 or more sellers sharing the buy box. You can see in this little example here, about 60% of the buy box is owned by your listing, and the 40% is owned by a competitor's listing. Amazon displayed different buy boxes to different buyers. This is a way of spreading the load a little bit and also allowing more third-party sellers have access to the buy box. The most common split here is between prime and non-prime buyers. You will more often than not find that the shared buy box is split between an FBA seller who is displayed to prime seller or prime buyers and a non-FBA seller who is displayed to non-prime buyers. But as I said before, you can have more than 2 people, and you can also have it based on 2 FBA sellers, 2 MFN sellers. It can be very varied, but the most common split will be FBA, non-FBA, prime, and non-prime. And something that is becoming more prominent in recent years is the used buy box. If you aren't a used seller, you probably have never come across this before, but there are situations now where if there isn't a new product available, and there is a good active market on the used area, where Amazon will give a used buy box, just like they would on a new product. This is still not too common, so you won't see it all the time, but it's well worth being aware that it does exist. So, why should you care about the buy box? What's so important about that little box at the top of the screen? Well, I have 2 numbers for you here, 83 and 445. And we're going to play a little guessing game. I want you guys to go into the chat and tell me, what do you think these numbers mean? Just open up that chat and type in a couple of guesses, and we'll see if anyone gets the answer. And just while you do that, I'm going to take a drink. Yeah. Oh, good on you, Dennis. Oh, we've got a few answers now. Oh, and we've already got the right answer there from Steve. Good work, Steve. Spoiling my game a little bit, but we still don't have a guess on the second one. So what we'll do is we'll give you a clue. The breakout down here is actually 83% and 445 billion. So Steve's already guessed what the 83 is, but what about the 445 billion? Any guesses on that? Close, Steve, but not quite. Let's just give you the answer. So yes, as Steve already guessed, 83% is the percentage of sales made through the buy box. And yes, it is 83%. My initial gut reaction would be a little bit higher as well, but no, this is it. This is the number. And the 445 billion, that is the number of retail sales made through Amazon.com in 2021. Now, it doesn't take a math major to know that 369 billion, which is the sales through the buy box, is a lot higher than 75 billion that's made not in the buy box. 75 billion, it's a little bit of money and it's worth getting some of, but I would prefer a bit of that 369 billion myself. And I'm sure you're all in the same boat. So here's a little graphical representation of what it's like to win the buy box versus to not win the buy box. sun and rainbows and happy skies versus, well, not so much. So just a little bit of fun. So what we're now going to do is we're going to take a look at the factors that impact you getting the buy box. And I'm sure some of this will be familiar to you, but there might be some that you're a little less familiar with. So we'll start with fulfillment method. It might come as a shock to you all, but Amazon favor their own. This means that if your products are being sold through Amazon FBA, you're much more likely to get the buy box. They are a step ahead of everyone else right out the gate. Next, we have seller fulfilled prime. This seller fulfilled prime is whenever Amazon themselves aren't dispatching the product, but it's going into their fulfillment network. So they still have some control over that product's dispatch and delivery to the client or to the buyer. And then finally, we have merchant fulfilled, and that's whenever you're picking and packing the product yourself and sending it from your own warehouse. I'm sure you can see the pattern here, where when Amazon has more control over the experience to the buyer, they are much more prone to give the buy box to that seller. This isn't to say that you should always sell FBA, but it very much helps in securing the buy box. And I just want to give fair disclosure here. There is the shared buy box tactic. Earlier, we mentioned the shared buy box, and that it's often split between an FBA and an MFN seller targeting the prime and the non-prime. You can potentially, with your MFN listings, push your metrics to the max and try to get a bigger slice of that non-shared, that shared buy box for non-prime sellers. But with 150 million Prime subscribers in the US alone, you can see you're fighting over a smaller bit of pie all the time. So next, feedback. So with feedback, feedback total and percentage are both incredibly important in securing the buy box. One without the other is meaningless. For example, you could have 100% feedback and 5 feedback ratings. That's useless. If you have 100 million feedback, but it's 75% feedback positive, that is equally useless. You need to have a high amount of feedback, and you also need to have a high percentage. Recent feedback also has a big impact on things. What this means is you can have a good feedback rating and good feedback totals, but if your recent feedback, your past 30 or 60 days has not been good, then it is going to greatly impact your chance of getting the buy box. Amazon see that as a red flag that something's not going right in your business, and they want to minimize the damage to their buyers. So recent feedback is also very important. With that in mind, it's important to maximize the good feedback. This means that every positive experience you have with a client, you should be trying to shout from the rooftops. If you have customer service queries, if you have any communication with the buyer that is positive, you should be ending that conversation, suggesting, if possible, they maybe want to leave some feedback. Similarly, there's out-of-the-box things you can try, such as adding notes, adding little bits of messages, personalized touches to the package itself, which maybe suggests that if they could leave some feedback, that would be great. And also, it's worth mentioning eDesk feedback. We're not here to talk about eDesk. This is a Repricer webinar, but it is worth noting that our eDesk tool does come with feedback, which automates requesting of feedback and keeping you on top of the negative feedback. So it's worth giving a try on a trial on that if you can. You can find in the promotion section within Repricer. And I've just realized I skipped over a point. This is unacceptable. You have to keep on top of the negative feedback as well, guys. If you do get negative feedback in, you need to respond to it as quickly as you can via your feedback screen. Make it clear to your other buyers that you're on top of it, that you're learning. Similarly, the 80-20 rule applies. 80% of your negative feedback are going to come from issues relating to 20% of the problems that you're having. Sort out those 20% of problems and your negative feedback will greatly reduce. Take every negative feedback as a learning experience and see what you can do to do better. And yeah, just going back to eDesk feedback, we also offer the ability to notify you of negative feedbacks in eDesk feedback. So the sooner you are aware of the feedback, the sooner you can resolve it with the client or the buyer. So we're going to have a quick fire round. Just have a look at a few of the smaller things that impact the buy box. Shipping and fulfillment times. Again, quite similar to what we talked about feedback here. You can have great shipping times and rubbish fulfillment times and rubbish fulfillment times and great shipping times, and individually they are useless to you. There's no point in shipping your products in 24 hours if it's going to take a week to arrive. It's no point in shipping it next day delivery if it takes you 5 days to ship it. It's important to ship it both quickly and have it arrive promptly. Similarly, refund and cancellation rates. There has always been the wish to minimize your cancellations, maybe by using refunds, giving a refund but don't actually cancel the order. I'm afraid that doesn't work. Both refunds and cancellations impact your metrics for the buy box, and you need to keep them both as low as possible. They will happen, but you should always do everything you can to minimize them as much as you possibly can. Next, we have message response time. Message response time is very important to Amazon because they have spent many, many years building up this view that they are excellent when it comes to buyer customer support. If you, as a seller, are doing damage to that reputation, you will get on to Amazon's naughty list when it comes to messaging and the buy box. So make sure you're responding within 24 hours and make sure you're not leaving anyone sitting who needs a response. And our last one might be one that a few of you might not be so aware of. If you're in a high-ranked product that sells a lot, you are not likely to get the buy box unless you have high stock quantities. The reason is Amazon wants to avoid risk that you are going to run out of stock and potentially have trouble fulfilling those orders. So unless you have the high enough stock quantities to handle that volume, they're not going to give you the buy box. This, of course, will only apply to higher ranked products which have high sales volume. If it's a more niche product with less volume, you're still likely to get the buy box even with smaller quantity numbers. So how does Repricer help? The more observant of you might well have noticed I left something out. And of course, we're talking about price. It's worth thinking of price as an overriding factor. Every other metric is incredibly important, but not to the same degree as price. I won't say that with the right price, you can override all of them, because you can't. But you can do a very good job of greatly increasing your chances of getting the buy box by having a more competitive price if you need to. This means that you should be employing different strategies depending on your own circumstances. So let's think of it this way. If you have a high price, or you can have a high price whenever your metrics are not so good, but you also can have a lower price if your metrics are not so good. So with that in mind, I've got two scenarios for you. First, we have an account which has relatively low feedback rating, 88%. You're taking 72 hours to ship your products. Maybe you've grown really quickly and you've now got a bottleneck in the warehouse. You need a couple new staff members. Cost of living is a question right now. Staff retention is a difficulty. So maybe you're down a couple of staff members. So it's taking longer to pick and pack those products. So it's down to 72 hours. Your stock quantities are low. And then you've had a recent spike in cancellations. Maybe that's because of the delay in shipments. All these combined mean that you need to be more aggressive in price in order to have the potential to get the buy box. So just as an example here, 25 cents. Maybe you want to price below by 25 cents, as an example. What you'd want to do is experiment with how much you need to go down by in order to secure the buy box in this sort of scenario. But this is all just an example because we're now going to have a look at the flip side. Scenario 2. And with Scenario 2, we have great feedback rating. We have our product shipped in 24 hours. Amazing. We have high stock quantities and our refunds and cancellations are rare. So here's the other side of the coin. In this scenario, you should be able to match or even price above your competition. And again, it doesn't take a math major to know that if you're selling a lot more products with Scenario 2 and you're getting more money for each, you're going to be making an awful lot more profit, which is good for your business, and it's good for you and your company and everyone involved. So let's get back to this elephant. Within Repricer, we offer two different kinds of rules. There's the basic repricing rule, and there are the competitor rules. Most of you are likely just using the basic repricing rules. I've seen the numbers. Most users within Repricer are still using the basic rules, and hands up, we maybe haven't done as good a job of communicating to you guys how useful these features are, the competitor rules. And that's something we're changing today in this webinar. The basic rules is whenever you open your repricing rule and you've just got that simple beat by 1 cent, beat by 1%, whatever it is on the first page of your rule. On the third tab of your rule, you've got your competitor rules. And these are very powerful. What they allow you to do is target different sellers in different ways. You can target specific sellers, but the most useful thing for us now is targeting different kinds of sellers. This means if you're FBA, you can say, I'm FBA, my competitor is FBA, I want to do one thing. I want to beat by a penny. But if I'm MFN and my competitor is FBA, I want to beat by 10p. Or I'm FBA and my competitor is MFN, I want to price above them by 5p. You can also tie in feedback. You can tie in fulfillment time. You can tie in all these different factors. So you can take into account all of these different factors within the competitors and then beat them in different ways. It's very powerful, and I would strongly recommend you have a look at using them. We have a number of videos on our YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/repricer, which talks about competitor rules and how you can target different kinds of sellers. And we also have help files on it. We've also given an email address at the end of the webinar. You can get in touch and we can send you some resources along. But I would strongly recommend having a look at the competitor rules for targeting. And it's also important that if you are making changes to your rules, you should be reviewing the results and keep on testing. Things change. It's always worth experimenting with your rules, looking at the different features when we add them in, or even just trying different scenarios out and see what works and reviewing those results. But we're going to put a pin in that because we'll be talking about results later. So let's have a look at the different features in Repricer, specifically targeting the buy box. We did just talk about the competitor rules. They're not specifically targeting the buy box, so it doesn't count. The first we've got is the buy box chaser. And because we are incredibly imaginative in Repricer when it comes to feature naming, what the buy box chaser is, it chases the buy box until you secure it. We use the advanced algorithmic processes that we have developed in order to put your product at the best price to secure the buy box. However, I would just like to stress that it is not a silver bullet. If you have low metrics, we would definitely not recommend using this feature. The reason being, as we've just discussed, if your metrics are low, you're going to have to beat by a lot in order to secure the buy box. And all that's going to do is it's going to tank your price down to its minimum and probably bring all the competitors down as well, which is just going to wipe out that product's profitability. However, if your metrics are good, this is potentially a very good feature, as it allows you to allow us to target the price down till you secure the buy box. And since you already have good metrics, you're likely to get it at a higher rate. So it's definitely one worth giving a try. Next, we've got the buy box optimizer. This is a feature that I absolutely love because what it allows you to do is to gradually increase your price when you have the buy box. If you win it, your price will just gradually tick up ever so slowly. You're put in complete control over how quickly and by how much you go up. And for the sake of being fair and balanced, there are other buy box winner features available. What I would just like to highlight here is we have our little example on the screen. Every 15 minutes increase by a penny. I would not recommend using that specific setup. I probably should have picked a better screenshot. The reason is if your price increases too quickly or by too much, Amazon will penalize you and take the buy box. And it's much harder to win the buy box than it is to retain the buy box. So increasing the price slowly and by a small amount is the way to go. Maybe every half hour increasing by a penny, but 100% avoid doing something silly like increasing your price by 1% every 15 minutes or by £1 or $1 every 30 seconds or every 30 minutes. That's just going to lose the buy box, and you're just going to be constantly fighting for the buy box, losing the buy box, fighting and losing. Gradual is the way to go. Next, we have the suppress buy box feature. Now, it might well be that a lot of you are not aware of this, depending on the categories you sell, but in some categories, you will often find there isn't a buy box at all. It does seem a bit strange, but yeah, sometimes the listing doesn't have a buy box. In these listings, you can tell Repricer what to do. You can have a look and say, okay, so there's no buy box. I want to not reprice. Go to my min, go to my max, or even do nothing special. This allows you to control how you behave in this unusual scenario. And just moving on, we're now going to have a look at that reviewing and tracking the buy box statistics. We have a number of methods within the system that you can use to track your buy box winning. First, we're going to look at a few of the insights from your dashboard. First, we've got the buy box ownership insight, and it's pretty cut and dry. What it does is it breaks down your buy box winning ownership over the past 7 days. What you're given is a nice simple chart that says for each day how many of the buy box you owned, didn't own, and partially owned. And for clarification, in this situation, owned means you had complete ownership of the buy box during that entire day. Not owned means you didn't have it at all, and partially owned means you had the buy box at some point during the day, but at other times of the day you didn't own it. Next, we have the Win Buy Box Insight. This is a pretty cool one, as what it does is it highlights products where you've had the buy box, but you've recently lost it because your minimum price is too high. What I would strongly recommend you do is, if you do have this insight, have a look at the products that are affected and see if there's any wiggle room to reduce your minimum so you can compete better and secure that buy box again. If you had it before, you're clearly already in good running for it, so that little bit of decrease might make all the difference. Next, we have the buy box predictor. What this feature does is it looks at your other metrics, it looks at your products, and it determines about how many products you could be making more, winning the buy box on if you reduced your minimum by just 10%. You can pull up the products from here and make the changes. It's a good indicator. If you have a lot of products that fit into that category, a small change might make a big difference. And then we've got rule performance. I talked earlier about the competitor rule, about buy box chaser, buy box optimizer, etc. If you are making any changes to your rules, this feature is your friend. And at the moment, it's a little bit hidden away, something we will be changing. In order to access it, what you do is you go to your repricing rules screen, make sure you're looking at your Amazon rules, and you'll see a performance button up on the top right. Click on it, and it will give you this performance breakdown for each rule. So it's useful straight off the bat just to see how many buy boxes you've won, but most importantly, it'll give you a breakdown over the past 7 days as well, but focused on just this one rule. That means if you do make any changes to your rules, whether that be new competitor rules, using one of our other features, you can come back in a couple of days' time, see what impact that has actually had on your sales and also on your buy box ownership. Very powerful. Strongly recommend you make good use of that. And let's not forget reports. Within Repricer, we have a whole suite of reports, and we've got two focused on the buy box. One breakdown of products where you do not own the buy box, and a separate breakdown of products where you do own the buy box. They're worth reviewing, particularly the do not own the buy box report, to see what you could potentially do to do better. And the ones you do win, well, that's worth a look, because they're definitely going to be your bread and butter. And last, but far from least, we have competitors. It is important to know who your competitors are, for they are the ones that you're trying to beat in order to secure the buy box. With the competitor screen, you're able to see who your main competitors are and how you're doing against them on the buy box, listing by listing. If you know that you're not doing so hot with some competitors when it comes to the buy box, you then have the option to use this fantastic little target icon on the right-hand side. Earlier, we talked about the competitor rules. And what this target allows you to do is to create a competitor rule right from the screen, targeting just that one seller. So say you know you have a seller who you can't win on the buy box for whatever reason. You just can't do it. Well, you can set up a rule where instead of beating them by a penny, beating them by 5 cents, you can beat them by 20 cents if they happen to be the cheapest seller on the listing. This is very powerful, allows you to target them more specifically, and it's definitely worth reviewing the screen to see who your competitors are, how you're stacked up against them, and potentially target them. And there we have it. That's our breakdown for today. A few features looked at. We've all learned a little bit with the buy box, and we had a bit of a guessing game. Fun for all the family. But let's have a look. Katie, have we some questions?
Thank you, Colin. That was excellent. We do have a few questions. So I'm going to start with Andrew. Andrew wants to know, in regards to how Repricer deals with winning the buy box in correlation to geographical location, as this is something that Amazon are really pushing these days.
Yeah, at the moment, we're focused primarily on the national scale rather than the local geographic one. It is an area that we would like to make changes to and improve. But at the moment, it's just national buy box we're looking at. We're constantly looking at the APIs to see what data is available and then what potential new features we can build into the competitor rules very specifically, but also more generally to allow you to target the regional buy boxes as well. But at the moment, I don't have much I can give on that. It's all pretty much national focused at the moment.
Thank you. And Peter wants to know, how does he know if his metrics are low?
Oh, now that's a question there, Peter. To be perfectly honest, your sales will be a nice indicator. If you find that your sales are feeling sluggish, then that could well be that's tied in. When it comes to the metrics, if we're talking more generally, if we're talking about feedback rating, if we're talking about fulfillment metrics, Amazon themselves have their performance review section in Seller Central. It'll give you breakdowns of how you're doing in things like response rate, refund levels, cancellation, fulfillment rates. They'll give you a bit of an idea there. So they give you a traffic light system there that you can use. When it comes to feedback itself, a good rule of thumb is that you should really make sure your account is as close to 98% feedback as possible. If it's below 98%, you're not doing so hot. 98's good, 99 and 100, that's where you want to be. When it comes to the volume, just as much as you possibly can. And that's where software like Feedback comes in, because it allows you to maximize that.
Brilliant, thank you. And Barbara is asking, does the buy box chaser work if the buy box is lost due to outside of Amazon competition?
Yes, the buy box chaser will work if you do not have the buy box. So it doesn't matter why you've lost it or where you've lost it, it will trigger regardless. That's how it needs to work. Because if you don't have the buy box, it's going to trigger. This does sadly mean that if, say, your metrics take a sudden hit, say, for example, you were able to get the buy box by being 5p lower with the buy box chaser, but then maybe you've had a spurt of cancellations and suddenly you're not able to get the buy box as easily, you're going to find your price will drop higher or drop faster than it did before to secure it. So it's always a good idea to keep an eye on your metrics more generally and turn the chaser off if you find that your metrics have taken a sudden hit. So yes, just to answer the question directly as much as I can, it doesn't matter why the buy box has been lost. If the buy box has been lost, the chaser will kick in.
Perfect, thank you. Phil wants to know, does Repricer know via the Amazon API whether your clients have the sole buy box or the shared buy box? How does Repricer use this info to apply tools such as Buy Box Chaser?
At present, in the back end, we are aware of whether you have the sole or the shared buy box, though we do not display this information on the screen at this time. And similarly, we also don't have a way of you targeting the settings differently. As it currently stands, the features such as Optimizer, Chaser will trigger if you don't have it at all. So, for example, the Chaser will not trigger if you have the buy box but someone else has it as well. Similarly, the Optimizer will kick in if you and somebody else have the buy box. That's how they've been designed. But we definitely have our eye on giving you a better breakdown of how much of the buy box you have, how many other sellers maybe share it, and also giving you better control. So maybe the optimizer, you'll want to say you only want to trigger the optimizer if you're the sole winner, for example. Though I'll be honest with you all, being the sole winner is fast becoming an endangered species.
Thank you. And Michael raises a good question. In the same vein as Andrew's question, is it not true that Amazon only reports one buy box price per ASIN to you? And if that is true, then the buy box chaser, buy box optimizer are only useful in chasing or optimizing that reported number, even though a large percentage of customers may actually be seeing a different buy box.
Well, in this case, it depends on the API that's being used on Amazon. It is true that Amazon's MWS API, which is an older one, will only tell you the one buy box winner. However, the system that Repricer uses includes more information, breaking down each individual seller, and we get the buy box status for each seller. So we are made aware if there are multiple sellers on the listing with the buy box.
Thank you. Sagar wants to know, will Repricer have the ability to reprice against our own offers with the same fulfillment?
Yes, I am aware that is a request that has come in recently. It's something that we are considering. We're always considering these types of settings, particularly. What I will say is to compete with self is a pretty niche setting, and we're always looking at it. But at the moment, you can only target yourself if it's a different fulfillment method, but we're always looking at if we can expand that out. But I can't give you any firm answer on that one way or the other at the moment. It's something we're looking at, but it's something that if we do make a change, it probably won't be happening right away.
Thank you. Steve, is the webinar available to download? I can just let you know, Steve, that you will be automatically emailed a recording of this webinar as soon as we end the session. And it's also going to be available on our YouTube channel and or on our knowledge base. Will would like to know, is it possible to use velocity repricers over the top of regular rules? i.e., if we're holding the buy box, can we tweak the price up over time? I've tried and the velocity rule does its thing, but then the main rule kicks in again and it goes back down again.
Now that is an interesting one, which I haven't come across that particular scenario. It is my understanding that the velocity rule should be taking priority in the event that you are the only seller on the listing. So what I would encourage you to do is pass that example on to the support email address which we will display on the next page, and ask for some clarification on it. It's something I would definitely like to investigate and get to the bottom of for you.
Absolutely. Phil, is your team aware that some regional offers are not being evaluated by your repricer? In other words, there may be 9 offers on a listing, but in some cases you are only evaluating competitor rules against 5 or 6 of those competitors. Amazon says this is because of a change made in May to the any offer change notification, so that regional offers are being excluded from the data.
Well, I mean, what I will say is in this area, we make use of all the offers that we get from Amazon in their notification system. If there is extra information that is being made available, we are always looking at adding these in as much as possible and as quickly as possible. As members of the Amazon Developer Council, we always try to keep on top of the new changes coming, though we do bear in mind that resources are always limited and there's always different potential features and improvements to made into the system. We're always keeping this under review, so I will be making sure to update and keep an eye on any changes regarding regional offers as much as possible.
Thank you. Uremi has a question. What happens when you end up targeting a competitor that is targeting you as a competitor and you both use the same repricer? And can you also elaborate a little bit on the usefulness of velocity?
Well, when it comes to having 2 different sellers, both using repricing software, whether that be Repricer or other unnamed tools, what it is important to do is to use the features that you have available to you to their fullest. If you're just beating by a penny in every scenario and not using any of our other tools and features, you're not using Repricer to its full potential, and you will potentially run into trouble in that scenario. What we would strongly recommend is making use of all the features you have available, particularly the profit protection features such as Kickstart and Sleep Mode. Both these features allow you to tweak your prices in different ways that will throw off the competition and try to pull competition prices back up. Kickstart, for example, will periodically change your price randomly throughout the day, and Sleep Mode allow you to turn off repricing and push your price to max overnight. So I encourage you to take a look at those. When it comes to velocity repricing, this is an area I very much would like to encourage everyone to have a look at. What it allows you to do is to reprice even if you're the only seller. By setting up a velocity rule, you can set up a rule to increase or decrease your price based on the number of sales. For example, you can say, if my sales are less than 5 in the past week, I want to decrease my price by 5p. Or if my sales are over 100, I want to increase my price by 20p. You can then tie that into your existing pricing rule. So if you happen to be the only seller, it will apply that instead, which is great.
Brilliant, thank you. And then just a lovely note from Louisa. Thanks for this webinar. Just a quick suggestion. It would be great if you guys can do a webinar for eBay. I agree. That would be great.
That is a fantastic idea. And Katie, we'll have to get on that.
Yeah, we will. We will indeed.
Just to say though, we do have a video on the YouTube channel, which was produced quite recently by myself, which is an introduction to eBay. So if you are not sure on eBay and the features available, just look it up. Actually, let me just pull it up and I'll stick it in the chat box. I'm going to do something to make it look like I'm doing my job today.
Okay.
Anyway, you go ahead and say what you're going to say, Katie, and I'll put this in the box.
Thank you for all the lovely comments, guys. Yeah, it was so great to have this, and we really want to have it a lot more regularly. If you do have any feedback, we'd love to hear it if you want to email us at accountmanager@repricer.com. And if you do have any questions on the features we discussed, or maybe if you can't find it in your account, please reach out. I'll also post the email here, and I will help you find it and use it. Yeah, please reach out with any feedback, and thank you so much. I think we're all caught up.
All right, guys, from me as well, thank you very much for coming. It's been great seeing you all. And yes, we'll get this presentation up so you can all rewatch it again if you want to.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Colin. That was great. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Uremi, can you say a little bit on Repricer and Walmart? So the multi-channel feature?
No problem. Always happy to talk about multi-channel. So with Walmart, we don't have a fully active repricer yet. So you can't say, I want to beat my competitor by a penny. but what you can do is you can use our multi-channel replicator. It allows you to clone your price from Amazon over to Walmart, but you can tweak it. So you can say, okay, I want my price on Walmart to be my Amazon price minus 5p or plus 20p, whatever way you want to do it. And we have a whole suite of features there that allow you to match up SKUs. So even if the SKUs are different on the two different sides. I'd strongly recommend having a look at that. And I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but we have a video on the YouTube account where we talk specifically about this. So youtube.com/repricer, just search Walmart and you'll find it.
Brilliant. And again, if you have any questions for us, account manager at repricer.com, or if you have any support issues you want to raise that might have come up, it is support@repricer.com. Thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye. Thank you.